When the F4U Corsair first arrived in the Pacific, the Japanese barely paid attention. They had fought P-39s, P-40, Wildcats, solid fighters, but none that truly frightened them. And when they saw the Corsair for the first time, with its strange inverted gull wings and unusually long nose, they didn't worry. It looked heavy. It looked awkward. It looked like another American experiment that wouldn't survive a proper dogfight against the Zero. They were wrong. The first time a Corsair came screaming down from altitude with its engine roaring and its 6.50 caliber Browning machine guns lighting up the sky, Japanese pilots realized this was something different. This wasn't just another American plane. This was a monster. Fast, brutal, built for killing, and built to survive almost anything. American pilots called it the bent-winged bird. Japanese pilots gave it a different name, Whistling Death. And the name wasn't poetic. It was literal. When the Corsair dove at high speed, the airflow over its wings produced a piercing, terrifying whistle. Japanese pilots reported hearing that sound right before the tracers appeared. You didn't turn to fight the whistle. You didn't climb. You only tried to get away because once the Corsair opened fire, anything caught in front of it simply didn't survive. But the Corsair wasn't originally respected, not even by American commanders. Early in the war, Navy test pilots complained that the F4U was too difficult to land on carriers. It bounced. It stalled. The nose blocked visibility. So the Navy handed the Corsair off to the Marines, who didn't have the luxury of rejecting it. They needed a fighter, any fighter, that could challenge the Zero. What they got was far more than a match. The Corsair was faster than the Zero by more than 70 miles per hour in level flight. It could dive faster, climb harder, carry more ammunition, and take damage the Zero couldn't even dream of surviving. Japanese pilots were trained to fight lightly built aircraft, planes that could turn tightly but couldn't take hits. Their entire doctrine depended on agility. They expected fights to become slow, turning circles where the Zero's maneuverability ruled the sky. But the Corsair refused to turn. It refused to play the Zero's game. It attacked only when it had the advantage and escaped before the Zero could react. Marine pilots quickly adopted a simple rule: never dogfight a Zero. Boom, zoom, repeat. Climb above them, dive through them, unleash 6.50 cals, and then climb away again before the Zero could bring its guns around. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't graceful, but it was devastatingly effective. Japanese pilots couldn't understand why their bullets weren't working. Zeros had no armor, no self-sealing fuel tanks, no structural strength. A few hits could set them ablaze. But the Corsair? It shrugged off rounds, lost sections of wing, took hits to the tail, and still kept flying. The Marines discovered that even when badly shot up, the Corsair often returned home, sometimes landing with huge holes in the fuselage, sometimes missing entire control surfaces. The Zero was a fencer's blade, precise, agile, lethal in the right hands. The Corsair was a sledgehammer, and the Pacific learned quickly which one mattered more in 1943. The moment that truly cemented the Corsair's legend came during its first major engagements over the Solomons. Marine squadrons flying out of primitive island strips would intercept incoming Japanese formations. The Zeros swept ahead, confident, expecting to push the Americans aside like they had done in 1942. Instead, the Corsairs dove through them like wolves tearing into a flock. The speed difference was shocking. Zeros tried to turn to meet the attack. Too slow. They tried to climb. Too late. They tried to dive away. Impossible. The Corsair was on them instantly, and once its guns opened fire, the fight ended in seconds. Pilots later recalled that the first few victories felt almost unfair. For the first time, Americans in the Pacific weren't fighting to survive. They were hunting. What shocked Japanese commanders wasn't just the Corsair's speed or firepower, it was how quickly American pilots adapted to using it. They refused to engage in turning fights. They refused to let the Zero dictate the engagement. They fought with discipline, coordination, and altitude. And when the Corsair attacked as a group, its impact was overwhelming. Japanese pilots who had dominated the skies early in the war suddenly found themselves dying in seconds, unable to apply their old doctrines. One Japanese veteran described his first encounter bluntly. The Corsair came down like a hawk. It fired once. My wingman was gone. Unlike the Zero, which caught fire easily, the Corsair's rugged design made it incredibly hard to kill. It used self-sealing tanks, thick armor, and a radial engine that could take hits and keep turning. Pilots brought back machines riddled with bullet holes, wings torn, hydraulic lines severed, fuselages cracked, and yet the engine still ran. The landing gear still lowered, and the pilot still walked away. That kind of survivability created a fierce loyalty among American pilots. Many described the Corsair as the fighter that looked after you. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a shield. And it earned something rare in war: trust. But the Corsair wasn't only an air superiority fighter. Once the Marines realized how much punishment it could take, they began loading it with rockets and bombs. Suddenly, the bent-winged bird wasn't just dominating the air. It was tearing apart everything on the ground: trucks, tanks, artillery, supply convoys, fortified positions. The Corsair wiped them out with terrifying efficiency. Entire Japanese units learned to recognize its iconic whistle. When that sound echoed across the jungle, soldiers knew to get low, because the next few seconds could mean total destruction. By 1944, the Japanese finally understood what they were up against. The Corsair had erased the technological advantage the Zero once held: speed, climb, dive, firepower, survivability. The Corsair outclassed it in every category that mattered. For the first time in the Pacific War, Japan's most iconic fighter was no longer feared. It was hunted. The kill ratios told the story brutally clearly. Corsair squadrons recorded some of the highest air-to-air success rates of the entire War Marine aces, like Pappy Boyington, Ira Kepford, and Kenneth Walsh, carved their legends in Corsairs. Cutting down Zeros with ruthless precision, Japanese pilots wrote in their diaries about the blue fighters that came from nowhere, and how impossible it was to hit them. And while the Zero could still outturn the Corsair in a tight circle, it no longer mattered. American pilots never allowed that fight to happen. They dictated every engagement: speed, altitude, angle, timing. The Zero became a relic of early war tactics, while the Corsair represented what warfare in the Pacific had become: fast, violent, and unforgiving. Even after the war, Japanese pilots remembered the Corsair with a mixture of fear and respect. Many said it was the American aircraft they least wanted to see diving on them. Not because it was the most maneuverable, not because it was the most elegant, but because when it appeared above you, it meant one thing: you were outmatched. The Corsair didn't win by outdancing the Zero. It won by evolving past it. It brought overwhelming power, brutal speed, and unparalleled toughness to a battlefield that had once favored agility. And it proved again and again that a fighter built to survive and strike like thunder was far deadlier than one built only to turn. The ugly, awkward, heavy fighter the Navy once rejected became the terror of the Pacific. The plane Marines trusted with their lives, the aircraft Japanese pilots feared long after the war ended, the bent-winged bird, the whistling death, the fighter that broke the Zero's empire in the sky.